Okay, so today I'm going to cover the importance of carbohydrates within the diet. So when you're using carbohydrates within the diet, it depends on how you're going to utilize them. For instances, if you have a very high carb diet and you don't exercise and you're in a caloric surplus, obviously you're going to gain weight. It doesn't matter even if you are in a low carb state and you're eating the necessary carbs, but if as long as you're in a, you have to realize that no matter with or without carbohydrates, you can lose weight if you're in a caloric deficit, and you can gain weight if you're in a caloric surplus. But when it comes down to losing weight, you have to realize something. Carbohydrates, especially when you use them in the correct manner, they could be very effective for instance, for recovery. They could be very effective for long distance running. For instance, people will use like dextrose in the sense of a 100-mile run to be able to fuel themselves and give them quick and easy energy. When it comes to losing weight, usually what I'll recommend is, especially for someone trying to lose weight, I'll recommend that they drop the carbs just so that way they're utilizing them in the correct manner and they're not just in excess of that, because you have to remember something else, that carbohydrates basically they suck in about 1 to 3 grams of water per gram. So if you are consuming 400 grams of carbs, you're going to have a lot of water retention associated with that. The same can go with basically like sodium. If you're eating a lot of carbohydrates, those foods can have a lot of sodium in them, and basically between the sodium and the carbohydrates, you're going to have a lot of water retention. That's why for instances, when you see people that are low carb or keto, you see them say, "Oh, I lost 30 pounds in a month." Well, that's because that was all. I guarantee you this: 90% of that was water weight. You might have lost 1 or 2 pounds because why? Because you were in a caloric deficit. You are eating less than you should be. You're high fats, but yet your body is in a caloric deficit. So guess what? You lost a couple pounds of weight, but most of it's going to be water weight. Now, when it comes to utilizing carbohydrates correctly, now if you're in the gym for an hour a day and you're utilizing large doses of carbohydrates, maybe it's because your body is very efficient with them. There's a lot of people that have a naturally fast metabolism. They can eat tremendous amounts of carbohydrates. One of my coworkers, she can eat carbohydrates like it's none of her business, and she doesn't gain weight. Because why? Her body just destroys carbohydrates, and I don't know how it works. No one really does, but it's how it works. Now, when it comes down to it, if you're doing, like, for instance, a competition, that's another way to utilize carbohydrates correctly, because people will go into the gym once, then they'll come out, and then what they'll do is they'll like load up on some dextrose, or they'll have some oats or some rice, or even donuts, because donuts are going to be high in carbohydrates, but yet they're going to be fast digestible because they're just purely just sugar and some fat. So you have to look at the way you utilize carbohydrates correctly. Now, carbohydrates can also be used in a good sense to maybe give you a little carbohydrates to fuel yourself for the day. So if you've been in a high carb diet and you're trying to reduce your carbs, yes, eating carbs, like for eating a bowl of oats in the morning, will help give you that energy. And then as you go through the day, you eat those small doses of carbs through the day, so that way your body's able to correctly utilize them. But if you're just eating lots of carbohydrates daily, you don't exercise, you don't care to exercise, you're just eating mass amounts of carbohydrates a day, mass amounts of product food, fast foods, yes, you're going to have a lot of water retention, and you're going to feel overweight. Because why? Because first and foremost, you're in a caloric surplus. And secondly, it's because your body is getting that surplus where it doesn't know what to do except for just continuously throw that excess carbs into body fat. So look at it this way: there's a lot of complexity to carbs. Carbohydrates can be very good, because as long as you utilize them correctly and you're not going in a crazy amount, like if you're consuming 1,000 grams of carbs a day, that probably isn't good for you. But if you're consuming a couple 100 grams of carbs, 1 to 200 grams of carbs, just because you're just trying to give yourself energy to get through your day, or you're trying to get yourself through a workout, or you're trying to push yourself extra harder in the gym, that's where the carbohydrates can be utilized correctly. And once again, just like in the running setting, you can use it correctly in the running setting. Drink some dextrose an hour before the race. That way, while you're running, or intra race, that way you have the proper amount of carbohydrates to utilize during that race. But don't be just using carbohydrates just to stuff your face and be done with it. Be smart about how you utilize carbohydrates, because they are very important. You can't demonize carbohydrates. Carbohydrates can be good, they can be bad, but altogether, utilized correctly, none of them are really that bad. It's the problem that our society has, that we abuse everything that we can. And that's the biggest issue right there. But as long as they're utilized correctly, they're utilized in the correct fashion, you can make carbohydrates your best friend because you could use them in the correct manner to get you through your day, to give you energy, to help give your brain the carbohydrates necessary. And I mean, especially if you are, let's say, low carb, and let's say you just got done with an exercise, you might have to load up on some carbohydrates, and people think, oh, it'll shoot me out of ketosis. Well, that's not necessarily true. If your body utilizes them correctly and you are in the correct state of burning them correctly, those carbohydrates aren't going to really kick you out of ketosis. You can ask several people within the world of exercise that utilizing carbohydrates correctly, you can still keep yourself in ketosis. It's just a matter of being smart about how you time them. So, but there's a lot of complexity to carbohydrates that I can't cover in this video just because there's a lot of complexity. It's just like the diet in general. It just depends on your diet, depends on where you're at, depends on how you're utilizing them. So don't demonize carbs, but also don't look at them as your best friend to make it where you can just eat copious supplies of it and still get away with whatever. I mean, some people can, but some people can't. But once again, a lot of complexity to carbs. Just don't demonize them just because you don't fully understand how carbohydrates work.